Hello everyone. Let's continue our discussion with the Angular. So previously we have seen what are the bindings. Now we are going to see what are the Angular directives. Directives are quite useful. There are two types of directives. One is an attribute directive and the second is a structural directive. Attribute directive, it changes the appearance or the behavior of the DOM element, that is a HTML. And a structural directive, it changes the DOM structure, typically by adding or removing or manipulating the elements, right? So let's see them one by one. So first is a ngIf. So ngIf is like star ngIf and it can take a Boolean value like here. So in your class, you declare a variable show scenario. It's a type Boolean and it's set to true. If the value evaluates to true, this element will be added, okay? List of scenarios. If it evaluates to false, this P paragraph block will be removed, okay? So that's the ngIf. Then there is a ngFor. Now ngFor will work on the array of elements. So in your class, you have an array, scenarios, okay? And in your HTML, you have a table body and this table row. In the table row, you will have this star ng for let scenario of scenarios. So these scenarios are coming from here. So this is mapping here. So you will iterate on all the scenarios and for each scenario, you will create one table row. Okay, that's the meaning of this statement, start ng for. And for each scenario, it is going to add one entry, one table row with the scenario.name, scenario.date. So this will have entry and it will fetch all the data and it will add the table row here, right? So that's ngFor. So here you can see one example, ngFor, you are iterating on some array elements. Then there is ngIf, which evaluates, which takes these values, publico and a discriminator column. And if this evaluates to true, then only it will add this next thing and so on. That's the Angular directives. Then Angular communication with the backend. So we have a front end and we have a backend. So how does the communication happen? So Angular communication with the backend can happen using services, okay? So it uses the concept of services. So creating a new service is simple. You just have to fire a command ng gs and the service name. So this creates the inside of the home folder, the home.service.ts TypeScript file, and yeah, so this is what it creates, right? Home service. Now this home service can be injected into any component. Okay, so injected by using a constructor. So you can import the service first, home service. You can import it. Then you can inject it in the constructor. Okay, create a method get scenarios. In the method get scenarios, call the get method passing the URL of the service, and this called REST service. So that's a implementation part. But yeah, this is the example of home service. Okay, so what you are doing, you are importing another module, a class HTTP client from the Angular common HTTP, and this is your home service. This is injectable. See this decorator, it tells that this class is injectable. That means it's a service kind of service. So this is your member which holds the address. Then in the constructor you have this HTTP service, okay, and in the get scenarios method you are calling this HTTP service to fetch this URL, okay. So that's about the services. Angular communication with backend. In the home component, import this HTTP service from home service injected by the constructor. Create a method get scenario list as it calls the get scenarios from the service. On the init method, call the scenario list when the home component is created. Okay. So that's a home component and the scenario list. So here, as you can see, our home service is injected here in the constructor of home component. So that's our local service, home service that in turn uses HTTP service. And on the ng and on init, so since it implements on init, on the ng on init method, you are calling this dot scenarios list, right? So this method gets called and which in turn calls the home service get scenarios and it subscribes to that, and whenever that yeah, that URL is hit and it comes back, it's going to it's going to assign these scenarios with that input, okay? So that's how we communicate with the backend. And in the app module, you have to import both the HTTP client module and the home service. Okay, add HTTP client module in imports array and add a home service in providers array. So this is very important. Okay, so these modules, the predefined modules will go in imports array, and your own service like home service will go in the providers array. And yeah, this is how we will see the entries of a HTTP client module and the home service. And this is how you will add this, add it in the imports here, HTTP client module, and in the provider's home service. Okay. And that's pretty much it. Okay. So we create a RESTful web service in the backend and returns the list of scenarios. So that's fine. So backend will have its own implementation where it will implement those methods, and it will return you the data that is required. So this is a class in a C#.NET where it will have the scenario DODs, and this array can be returned to the caller. Okay. And yes, this we have already seen. Now let's see the routing. Routing, let's see in the next tutorial. So thank you very much for watching this. Let's stop this.